When you're lying in bed at night, do you ever randomly remember some embarrassing stuff you said and beat yourself up over it? If so, what happened? When I was 11, I did a poop at school and it clogged the toilet. Someone thought it was bark from the playground and told the teacher. After lunchtime, the teacher set up a meeting with the classes that were allowed to use the toilet and told us that whoever put the bark in the toilet had to own up, or our camp would be cancelled. I was way too embarrassed to confess in front of the class and I felt horrible. I think one guy ended up confessing to get the class out of trouble. Actual legend. I decided I would tell the teacher after school, but then the cleaner came in and whispered something to the teacher in charge, and the teacher told the class it was a big misunderstanding. I wanted to die. I think I'm over it now, but that haunted me for a long time. Sounds like the best possible ending. You didn't have to embarrass yourself, the kid who didn't do it earned legend status, and no disciplinary action was taken. I was really drunk once, and I got a phone call. I thought the caller ID said Matt, which was the name of a good friend at the time, so I yelled, "What's up you sexy mother flipper?" into the phone. Turns out it wasn't Matt. It was Mark, who was my boss at the time, calling to ask if I could come in that evening to cover a shift. He was very old school, late 50s, no sense of humor. The awkward silence before he awkwardly pretended he hadn't heard it will haunt me forever. Painful but hilarious. I had to help a few teachers for a day at school. I was asked to grab an Animal Farm book from a classroom. I got to the classroom, asked for Animal Farm book at least 5 times, then realizing 30 minutes later that I completely misread the call. I have no idea why this is the funniest one. Trick-or-treating with my little brother as kids. This woman several houses down is standing on her porch looking directly at me and hollers, "Hey, do you want to trick-or-treat with us?" My brother is across the street, so I holler uncomfortably loud, "Hey, you wanna trick-or-treat with them?" I turn back to the woman and she goes, "Oh, actually I was talking to those people," and points behind me to different kids. I died that day and my corpse has walked the world for 17 years since. During Halloween as a kid, when everyone was saying thank you for their candy, I accidentally had a stroke and yelled Thanksgiving. There was one morning at my previous job where I worked as a drafting assistant, basically just a highly technical administrative assistant who also performed technical writing, that I did something ungodly embarrassing. I was walking around one of the mechanical shops, checking up on a project, taking notes, pictures, marking stuff off, my usual routine. Well, as I come around the corner of the vehicle, there are 2 mechanical engineers working on the door. I can't recall exactly what I was checking at that moment, but in my attempt to get a good look, one of the engineers reached out his fist to give me a friendly morning fist bump. Now, I'd love to be able to say that I was tired that morning, or that I was simply too preoccupied with what I was doing. But that would be a lie. Here's what happened next. I lowered my clipboard and my pen and I stared at his fist for a good moment. I then turned to look up towards the man's face. I stared some more. And then I turned my attention back to his fist and continued to look. The man was still holding his fist out waiting for me. But at this point my lack of response got the attention of the other engineer he was working with. And so now he was looking at me. 2 engineers staring directly at me, one with his fist out, and me looking at the fist. Finally, though, I begin to outstretch my hand. However, instead of reaching out and returning the fist bump in kind, I extended my index finger. The 2 men's attention followed my hand. And, like a child touching a foreign substance, I pressed my finger to his fist. The man slowly returned his fist. He and his partner became transfixed on the part of his hand that my finger touched. The man held his hand up to see if I left a mark. His partner joined him in looking. There was no mark. They looked back towards me. I looked at them and then smiled. I then made my way back to my office. I was about halfway there before I realized the absolute absurdity of my actions. Once I got back, I didn't leave my office for the rest of the day. I had a mate in high school whose dad had recently passed away from cancer. A group of us were hanging out at lunch break, and somehow we got onto the topic of Finding Nemo. I don't know why, but I blurted out, "Imagine if Nemo's dad was dead." The room just went silent, and then I made it worse by immediately going, "Sorry." Possibly the cringiest moment of my life. I still have no idea why I said it. Oh man, that reminds me of the most awkward moments of my life. If I could erase my memories, this one would be the first to go. I was at a hotel with my girlfriend of 2 years at the time. We got in there and immediately wanted to do the deed. But we had just made a 2-hour journey over there, and I was holding back a monstrous poop. So I decided a flash poop would be the way to go. I was in and out of the bathroom in 2 minutes. After this I get on the bed, and we start getting down to business. I was sitting down, and when I got up, there was a perfect brown dot on the fresh sheets. I contemplated throwing myself out of the 8th story window in our room at that moment. I've never recovered. I still wipe like 10 times just to be sure. I'll start. A girl I was dating at the time in high school was hanging with me during a free period, not lunch. So we stayed in a teacher's room who was friendly and just talked and did homework. I was feeling really sick and full of phlegm, but I didn't do my homework last night and really needed it done. So she noticed that I looked deathly ill and asked if I was okay. Before I could respond, the anxiety and fear of responding made me fart, which I tried to hide. That contraction made me somehow sneeze, so I not only made a loud fart in a quiet room in front of her and the teacher, but blew nasty boogers all over her. She ended up almost crying out of grossness. She had a weak stomach and couldn't even stand the sight of blood. We broke up. She broke up with me about a month after, and I can't help but feel it was because of that. I was dating a guy when I was about 19. He was the hottest, most exciting partner I'd ever been with. He lived a couple of hours away, so I'd go visit him on the weekends. One weekend we were napping fully nude in his bed after we'd had done the deed. At some point he'd gotten up and was on his computer in the same room. I farted in my sleep so loudly that it woke me up. I think being totally nude and not being covered by anything amplified the sound. Anyway, as soon as it woke me up I was mortified and all I could say was, "Wow, I totally let it rip." He said, "Yeah you did." He ghosted me after that. He'd always been vocal about how grossed out he was by pooping and stuff like that, so I'm guessing this was just as bad. It still bums me out to this day. He was such a fun weirdo and would write funny weird stories and give them to me. Okay, so my stupid thing I said was at the end of several screw-ups, because I was daft. I was into this chick for a long time. I liked her a lot. She was adorable, funny. 10 out of 10. Now the first strike was that she was a giggly mess around me. Like I was her Jimmy Carr. Nice ego boost, but didn't think much of it. The second strike was those little heart things you can send on Instagram. We'd spam the flip out of those to each other. I just thought it was funny and moved on. The third strike was that I was who she went to for all the advice. And the dumbest thing I ever said was the fourth strike. We were talking as we walked, and she says, "Yeah, there's this guy I like. Not sure if he likes me, but we send each other a lot of hearts on Instagram." I thought she was asking for advice, and I said in my infinite wisdom, "That's not necessarily true. We send each other hearts all the time on Insta and it doesn't mean anything. Kill me." There's a woman I go to school with. We have mutual friends, and I find her physically attractive, but despite that, my feelings toward her are a mixed bag, for lack of a better term. During freshman year, I was leaving a room one day and almost walked right by her. When I noticed it was her, my brain and heart panicked simultaneously. After duking it out, the two came to the conclusion that the perfect response to this dilemma was to start laughing maniacally. She stopped, turned around, and stared at me. Other people who left surrounding rooms stopped to stare at me. I was so mortified, but I couldn't stop. I'm pretty sure I was still laughing as I made my escape. Not my proudest moment. I helped a friend move once, and decided to walk over to a nearby bar one night after we finished. He and his wife were both tired, so they went to bed. My night started normal enough with me just sitting at the bar, enjoying a beer or three, but then I got to talking to some strangers, and then we started laughing and cutting up. Then we were buying each other drinks, and then we were doing shots. Then they left, and I was by myself at this bar again, absolutely plastered. Well, drunk me decides to be all outgoing with everyone standing outside smoking, and he decides to do this by walking up next to some nice Asian gentleman, putting his arm around him, and complimenting his hair. He then turns to the other dozen patrons and says, "Hey, who's got better hair, him or me?" I hadn't even done anything with my hair. It doesn't make any sense why I did this. It was just on my head looking like regular old hair. That group was looking at me like that one meme where all those people are looking at the camera with WTF faces. The Asian guy politely removed my arm from his shoulder and went off with his friends. And soon it was just me and these two older women standing outside. One of them looks at me and goes, "Your hair isn't all that great," before stubbing her cigarette out and going inside with her friend. Like and subscribe for more videos.